calls facing up. It shows kindness and openness, and it's a universally accepted gesture.
From an evolutionary perspective, what this shows people is that you have nothing to hide. You are not trying to be smart.
Just to breathe and be. You show me your palms and now I have a deeper glimpse into the fractal you hold temporarily. Unfold without clenching desire to breathe.
All right. Doing something kind of insane here. Only kinda. Recording a podcast, a little solo cast, while driving to Space Camp, Grateful Fest up at Nelson Ledges, Northern Ohio. About halfway there, had to take a little pit stop. Noticed that one of my tires had a small bulge in it when I was at a rest stop. Thankfully noticed it. So I looked it up, and apparently that could be dangerous. So I think I potentially avoided a possible blowout there. So put me back close to an hour, but I'm not too far. Anyway, that's boring. For anyone tuning into the video, you get to watch the nice Ohio sky in the background here. Not a whole lot to see. For anyone that's tuning in that is unaware, we do have the ReMinders podcast available on audio-only podcasting formats as well. So, it's kind of nice to have a video podcast. I tune into those now and again myself, but usually I'm listening to audio-only. I use Apple Podcasts just because that's an app on my phone. I don't know what other people use, Spotify or whatever else, but feel free to tune in. Anyway, I've been thinking lately, I actually recorded a take of these ideas earlier last week, just expressing, well, first of all, I did about 10 minutes of yapping and then about 10 minutes of a guided meditation, so I probably will release just the guided meditation portion of that in the near future. But yeah, more or less expressing that I'm wanting to get more consistent with the podcast, and even though I don't particularly feel super inspired to do solo podcasting too often, I realized that I could use the opportunity when I don't necessarily have friends or guests lined up to co-create with, that I could get back to the original intention of this YouTube channel, which is to do guided meditations. So just a little share of intention on that note. But yeah, I figured I would expand a bit on something that I have been thinking a bit about lately, which is the idea of devotion. A few ideas: devotion, mission, purpose, what motivates, what inspires, things of that nature. I've been, speaking of consistency, wanting to, or intending to, be more consistent with my output on Instagram, on the Reminders for Lucid Living Instagram account, because in the past I've really been putting all of my expressions onto the Shantieris account, which is supposed to be centered around music, but also has more or less been my personal account as well. So I want to sort of not split necessarily my attention, but split the, just tickle the algorithms in a bit of a different way. I want Reminders to be more focused and actually reaching people that are in that mind frame of wanting that type of content, not necessarily just my friends and family that may be following my personal account. You know, I was speaking to someone recently about how TikTok has historically been a platform where creators are mostly seen by people that are not people that they know in real life. And even though I think since the fake ban and whatever post era we're in on TikTok now for most of 2025, before that I felt like the algorithm was a bit more organic, but even still, it's still that nature where we're being seen mostly and seeing people mostly that we don't know from just all around the world, which, you know, I think we all have our qualms and struggles with our relationships to the internet and how much it can be an attention drain and energy drain in that way as well. But there's also a lot of beautiful things that we get access to because of the way that the internet is run and available now. So in my opinion, TikTok has been one of the better avenues for finding useful information, although also very much a perpetrator of that draining of energy, as I said, draining of attention. But the reason why I bring that up is that I feel like it is really helpful to have specific and organized and focused audiences. So recently I have been just sharing videos that I found from TikTok and saved in this folder collection that I have on the app for the last few years, and, you know, got a couple hundred videos saved on that. And it's just kind of funny. It's just kind of like a little digital hoarding type of thing unless I choose to share them. So that's kind of the idea. So I've been sharing some of those videos on the ReMinders Instagram page lately. So if you're not following that, feel free to check that out if you're into tapping into just little short form reminders. You know, when I first started this podcast, the whole spiel was how I named this podcast ReMinders because, you know, I don't really believe in preaching or in teaching people things that they, as far as spiritual and emotional insights, I don't feel like we can really like pass those on to others in a direct way. But I do believe in the value in reminding each other of what we have already come into contact with. I think that's usually the most potent form of, at least for me, tuning into content online is just reminding me of things that I've already like discovered in myself, and maybe just haven't created discipline or devotion to stabilizing those insights. And so I recently was speaking on a story about the idea of reframing discipline and using the word devotion, because to me, discipline just feels very strong-armed and, you know, kind of white-knuckling this experience of just trying to be better and doing better just by being better, and it just feels perhaps overly masculine in that way. And to me, I feel more of a inspiring energy in the word devotion. And also because there's a subtle question in the subtext of the word devotion, like what are we devoted to? And so I feel that lately I've been, you know, I mean, anyone following the podcast maybe has noticed that I haven't been very consistent this year. I released an episode in like February and then sort of revived it with my friend Selena a couple weeks ago. And not to get into the nitty-gritty on any personal stuff, but, you know, I've been going through some environment shifts and some changes in my personal life, and taking stock of what's working, what's not working, what's flowing, what's in alignment, what's not. And part of that process has just been like moving through stagnations and also not moving through certain stagnations. So I'm trying to kickstart that process of keeping things flowing and keeping things moving in my life by taking stock and inventory of what motivates me and what missions am I serving. So the idea of devotion and the ideas of mission, I feel like it can be on an individual day basis, in the morning, just checking in with myself, what I want to devote myself to today, what's my mission today, and sometimes that can be as simple as devoting to rest and health and to not having a cluttered to-do list or an overly ambitious list of things that I would like to produce or get done, but rather just whatever it may be. But, sometimes I feel like we are in such need of rest and rejuvenation, and so often we wait for life to knock us on our ass to even sit down and just be for a while, sit in silence or whatever it may be. So I've been coming back to the mindfulness practices, coming back to meditation, slowly but surely, and just reminding myself how much I enjoy tapping and tuning back into that meditative, mindful state, and how it doesn't have to be a big to-do, it doesn't have to be an hour-long session, but, coming back to our relationships with the internet, how many hours do we gladly donate to the internet and to the algorithms? So it's just this old tired discussion of dopamine chasing versus like facilitating space for contentment, facilitating relationships to ourselves and to our communities and our loved ones to, foster that more serotonin and oxytocin and those types of feel-good hormones that aren't the jittery, agitated experience of the dopamine chasing that I feel like so many of us are really, really caught in the maze of. So yeah, that's just kind of a little background into what's been kind of on my mind lately, and I'm still creating clarity around what the larger mission is, with the podcast, with my life in general, what am I devoting myself to, what am I committed to creating, those types of things, and I won't yap and musing about that right now, but those are the types of things that I'm digesting. So curious to hear from all of you if you feel like you've grounded into a devotion, into a mission, whether it be for this week, this month, this year, or for your life that you'd like to share on. Please do so. Drop a comment, shoot a message, whatever you got. If you'd like to come on the podcast and discuss that type of thing or anything else, please reach out to me. As I kind of alluded to, I'm always looking for more people to share this space with, and again, more so than even wanting to put myself on a platform or on some sort of pedestal to a soapbox, if you will. More so than that, the reason why I keep coming back to the podcast is because it's such a fruitful therapy for myself to have a container for these types of conversations with my loved ones and my friends. And if anything, I'm just building a database or archive for beautiful, inspired conversations, just to look back on myself, if nothing else, and hopefully resonate with some like-minded heads and hearts out there, So if you're tuning in and you're continually enjoying this type of expression, I do encourage you to share it with a loved one, create these types of conversations in your own life and let it, propagate outward in that mycelium network of human connection that we are all engaging in one way or another, whether it's proactive or passive, it's still moving through us. Speaking of, I mentioned that I'm going up to Grateful Fest, aka Space Camp, a little in-person meetup for the online community Church of Chill, just facilitated by Sean and Cass from the Very Ape podcast, Very Ape TV, where they create and release documentaries essentializing the often seen as misfits of society. The most recent one is called Wild Magic. Highly recommend checking that out. I watched it a couple times already. It just came out, I think, last month. I traveled around the States, just following different threads of people, one person leading to another person. Essentially, the topic being American mysticism. So a lot of healing modalities kind of represented in that one, and different people's stories to tune into. So anyway, Space Camp is a annual meetup that they've been doing the last few years, and I was grateful enough to be able to go last year and this year to Grateful Fest, which is at one of my very favorite venues, festival venues and campgrounds in Northern Ohio. And yeah, it just goes to show how, you know, just a little bit of effort, getting some humans together that maybe haven't even met yet. Get together, make friends, have some beautiful conversations and beautiful moments with people that otherwise maybe seen as strangers, you know. And I just think it's such a beautiful opportunity to connect with people that otherwise may not have the opportunity to do so, or even given the opportunity may not spark the conversation. I've been thinking about how these types of events have been really cool for me to show up more or less solo, and even though I'm the type of person that may not make conversation with strangers out in public, going to a music festival or some type of like intentional gathering, I feel like having just one common thread with people makes it so much easier for me to spark conversations and just be willing to be socially brave in ways that I really haven't practiced embodying too much in my social life. So yeah, I was really blessed to make some great friends last year, and actually the episode that I did in February was with 3 of them that I met at this festival last year. So anyway, just a quick little heads up and plug on Variape, and you know, seeing them do their thing with the podcast on a weekly basis, more or less. It was really inspiring to me and a reminder of consistency, which I already alluded to, or, you know, already acknowledged that I struggle with artistically and in other ways as well, I'd imagine. Or, yeah, I'd say. But specifically for the music, you know, I've been sitting on this album that it's probably like 90% done and has been for over a year, honestly, if not longer. But I've just been, I've been sitting on it. I feel not as excited about the songs because they were written 5 years ago or so. Some of them less time. But they just don't feel like the fresh, inspired music. And I've really been digesting this relationship that I have with audio production, going back and forth with how much I feel capable of producing my own music in a satisfying way, because it's, you know, borderline impossible to mix your own music in an unbiased fashion, you know. So it's just about learning to work with those biases in a way that's not completely wonky and doesn't end up coming out in a way that, you know, when you're just like too in the weeds with something, you know, losing the forest for the trees or whatever the saying is, right? So to be able to like maintain that big picture and still dial the details in a way that is satisfying has been a struggle for me, and I lose steam when I feel like I'm working on something for too long and it's not quite coming out right. Plus I've, as I mentioned, changed environments. I'm not in the same studio space anymore. My access to a decent studio environment is very minimal, so that's been playing a part in that. But there's been this pattern I've been in for the last 5 years where I will get really motivated to be an artist, an actively releasing artist, because it's, you know, totally an option just to do your thing in the privacy of your home for the therapy of making art or music or whatever it may be. But to choose to share that is like, it's a declaration that, like, on some level you feel that the art wants to be heard, or that there's people out there that want to tune into this, you know, that it would bring people benefit or value. You know, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't an element of that. It's not that I'm, you know, desiring large-scale recognition or fame or anything like that, even though, of course, because those are mostly the examples of musical artists that we see in society these days, of course, there's like, on some level, there's that storyline, in at least comparison for, I'm sure, all artists, right? Because, like I said, that's the precedent that's set. That those are the artists that we grow up, for the most part, exposed to, following, inspired by. You know, those are the role models. But we live in a very different world, especially musically speaking. The music industry is very different than the artists than it was for the artists that I look up to, you know, the cats from the 70s and 90s and even 2010s to a degree. But without getting into the weeds of that, I just want to kind of think out loud a bit about the value in sharing our expressions. And I remember having a conversation with my mom when we were in Florida after making the little family podcast that we did, AI generated family fun was the title for that one. And afterwards we were just walking on the beach, going to the pier. It was a bit of a walk. It was one of my favorite little chapters of that trip, because this was right before Hurricane Helene, and gracefully we were like a near miss in the town in Florida that we were in, but there was still big storm, and well, it was just stormy. It wasn't like necessarily raining at this point, but the clouds were just going nuts, and I just remember the contrast from like one end of the beach to the next, just like, I don't know, I felt like there was like sepia tones on one side and then just like dark clouds on the other. It was just kind of a wild scene. But anyway, we're taking this longer walk to the pier after the podcast, and me and my mom were just talking about, you know, why share things like this on the internet? Like, what good does that do? And not even really in like a self-deprecating way, but just genuine curiosity of what's service, what's the function, you know? What function are we serving, is what I mean to say. And at times, you know, I'll get into the self-deprecating storyline about it, but I'm learning to like identify those dead thoughts that go nowhere fun, nowhere life enforcing, and just throw that shit to the compost, and not to identify with those types of thoughts. Yeah, I think that the value in sharing ourselves is an act of being fully embodied. And Selena and I discussed a bit on the last podcast, a bit of an astrological perspective of the Chiron aspect of someone's chart being the wounded healer. So it's this idea, or this energy, that if we can overcome the obstacles of, could really be our superpower. And for me, it's Leo. And I just am digesting how very true that is for me in my life, that when I can overcome my own shyness and my own tendency to want to diminish myself and stay small, you know, when I overcome that, like, A, it feels better, and B, I feel like people enjoy the things that I have to share, you know, whether it's singing a little song or doing a little dance or having a conversation that brings us back to the center of self and back into gratitude and back into presence. So just a few words on that topic, just some of the things that I've been digesting a bit. So again, if you're resonating with these types of conversations, I encourage you to let me know. Tickle in the algorithm with a like on these videos or on the podcast apps or wherever you're seeing this, hearing this. Helps, helps connect those dots in the ether, the digital ether as well. Anyway, I appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. Gonna see how crazy this sounds with the road noise in the background and if it'll be usable, but we'll see. Anyway, keep on. Love y'all.
More than this experience of form, out of the formless we are born, just to breathe and be. With your palm upon my heart, stroke the spark that speaks inside